Okay, in this video, I'm going to be sharing 3 more card designs just as a thank you for being a Patreon supporter. So thank you very much. I really, really do appreciate your support and your help and all of your love. So thank you. If you didn't see this already, I posted these 3 on my YouTube channel, and then I'm going to be doing 3 more here as a bonus. So in this first one, I'm going to just lightly draw out the word joy. And this could be any word. And it's just really, really rough. But I just want that general idea of where I'm going to be placing those letters so that I know where to place my next elements. And I haven't wet down my palette for a little bit, so I'm just going to quickly do that. I like to wet down my palette just so the paints can be softening up, and when I'm ready to pull from them, they're ready to go. Okay, I'm going to be using this red, just alizarin crimson. I always reach for that color. And then I'm going to mix it with a little bit of Scarlet Lake. I'm using my size 4 round brush. Now I'm just going to do mini versions of those berries. And let's see, I'm going to just add them in right next to the letters. And because they're so tiny, I want to vary the red just slightly. It's hard to do that when I've got a lot of pigment on my brush, so I'm trying to kind of dab out the excess just on a paper towel. I'm going to go in and pick some of that extra up right here. And you can always just vary the red by just changing the color too. So here I'm using more of that Scarlet Lake. And I just want a few groupings of these berries, and I want to make sure there's a nice little balance. So right here, I've got kind of 3 down at the bottom and just 1 at the top. So I'm going to add 1 more little group on my O. And then with sap green, I'm just going to mix that in on my palette. And I'm going to do kind of mini versions of those sprigs. You could always use a smaller brush if you're worried about how much pressure you're going to be adding. I probably could have used a size 4. Or sorry, I'm using a size 4. I could have used a size 0. And let's see. Okay, now I've got those little sprigs in. I'm just going to add little tiny versions of my little holly leaves. Okay, now the fun part is when we get to add in the letters. And if you watched my video over on YouTube, you saw that I wanted to use my gouache straight out of the tube. That's when it is the most concentrated. And I'm going to get the most pigment. So on this first pass, I'm just going over kind of those pencil lines that I made. And then I'll go over this again, just adding any more detail. And then once my paint is totally dry, I can go in and erase any pencil lines if they're still showing. But this gouache paint really adds a nice, just elegant detail. I like using gold. You could also use black. That would give it some nice elegant look too. Okay, so now I've got my main joy in place. I'm just going to go in and add just a little bit of flair and thicken some of these downstrokes. So that's a really simple kind of card design. And if you wanted to, you could add a little border. Really fun. Okay, for this next one, go back to, let's see, which color do I want to use? This is my deep scarlet, or my perylene scarlet. I can't remember exactly. Let's see. It's called Deep Scarlet. And again, I'm going to vary my red just a little bit. And I'm changing up the size of these berries just slightly. Just a personal preference thing. Now I'm using a little bit of alizarin crimson. All right, now I'm going to add in those holly leaves. I've got to wait just a little bit for this to dry before I can add any more detail. So I'm just going to set this aside. This last one is going to be really fun. Just going to paint tiny poinsettias. And I'm kind of simplifying these just because they are so small. I still want them to read as poinsettias. Now with this pink color, and you can use whatever color, I'm just going to add in a few little berries. Okay, now that while this dries, I'm going to go back to this one and finish it off. So I'm using my raw umber violet. I'm just going to go in here and connect some of these little berries. Oh, and that wasn't all the way dry, so there you go. That sometimes happens. I'm just going to add a couple little sprigs. And now I'm going to do something a little bit unusual for me. I don't normally splatter, but I think this will look pretty. So if you're worried about getting it on anything else, I recommend moving where you don't want the splatters. And I'm just going to place a scratch piece of paper over where I definitely don't want splatters to go. And I'm just going to tap my brush. And I did get a little bit of splatters over here, but I think it looks fun, and up here. So like I said, if you don't want splatters anywhere, just make sure that you are mindful of where you're splattering and what you're covering up. And then with my calligraphy pen, and you can just add in your sentiment there at the bottom. I'm just going to add in little different types of leaves and greenery. I'm just adding in a little bit at a time. I want to brighten this up just a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little bit of a brighter green. And where you might add elements, it might be different than where I'm adding, just depending on how big you end up painting different things. So just pay attention to the space you're working with, especially because these are so small. You just want to be mindful of the space you're working with. Okay, and the last little details. Add just a few little gold dots to the center of these flowers. And then I'll just add in my sentiment right in this space. You could go back and add a border or cut it down a little bit smaller and maybe mount it on a piece of cardstock or something like that. Just to help ground everything. The dot border might have been a little bit too busy for this card. But you can see just the different options. A dot border, solid border, splatters, anything like that. Just to add a fun little detail.